We want to welcome to the studios 5th District Congressman Bob Good. Appreciate you being here. There have been a lot of developments over the past 24 hours and, of course, earlier in the week as well. One of the things that's happened very recently, reports that former President Trump may pay a visit to the Capitol next week to speak to House Republicans. Is that a good idea? Would you welcome him to come back to the Capitol? Because you were there on January 6th. You were in D.C. at the time when the insurrection was going on.
I welcome President Trump wherever he wants to go. Certainly was a big fan of his presidency. I think he was an outstanding president. I don't know if he'll end up coming on Tuesday. He certainly would be welcomed by myself and my colleagues. What I'm hearing now is he may be coming to endorse a candidate for the speakership, but I'm not certain what exactly he's planning to do.
We have heard the same thing, that he's already picked someone. He's apparently picked Jim Jordan as the person that he would like to see become the next speaker. Steve Scalise is also attempting to get that job from what we understand. Who would you support and why?
Well, I'm not going to speak to a specific candidate. I have resisted doing that in a number of interviews, as you might be aware of, just because I want to let the process play out. I want to have all of the candidates. Right now it's 2 officially, maybe 2 or 3 others who are thinking about it. We want to vet them, test them, challenge them, see who does emerge, who makes the commitments that each of us are looking for to support, but also who can unite our party to get to 218 votes, ideally 221, get to unanimous. And I think we'll spend hours, perhaps days, vetting them, testing them, challenging, debating. And then we will, by definition, have to be united to do that and to come out of our conference committee with, again, hopefully unanimous, bring it to the floor, pass it on the first vote with unanimous Republican vote. So I have interests and concerns and regarding all the candidates. And so I've teased them and said, I'm not going to endorse you right now because that would doom your campaign, no matter whoever it is, with some of the folks who are a little upset with me from this past week.
Because the last time you guys took a vote, and it was Kevin McCarthy, it took 15 rounds.
It did.
And you're hoping that that won't happen this time. What's going to keep that from happening?
Well, because what was so different about January and every speaker vote we've had in modern times, and one of the reasons why I was critical of that, was it was a coronation. And January, which is related to what happened this past week with Speaker McCarthy, but January was really a coronation where you've got the presumptive speaker, and everybody's supposed to fall in line and just vote for that presumptive speaker. You know, in Congress, courage is in short supply, and self-ambition and self-preservation tends to rule the day, at least publicly. And so while many members of Congress expressed concerns and doubts about Kevin McCarthy to one another privately, their members are afraid to step out of line, raise their hand, not be loyal to the throne for fear of consequence and retaliation. But I said back in January, and I said leading up to this vacate vote, that once Speaker McCarthy was removed or prevented from becoming Speaker, you wouldn't have any shortage of individuals who would like to be Speaker, and I knew that would be the case, and it has proven to be the case. So it's going to be healthy to have, again, a debate and a discussion, and for them to earn the support. And so I think the Republican Party will be united in wanting to solve it in our Republican conference and bring it to the floor. And my hope is, and what I'm pushing for, let's don't come out and vote on the floor till we've wrestled through it and come to consensus in the conference.
And so, yes, one of your colleagues, Ben Klein, is already saying that you guys do need to coalesce around one person so that what happened in January doesn't happen again. What is it that you want to hear from someone that is going to put you in their camp? Because when McCarthy ran, you were not behind him at all.
Well, McCarthy represented the failures of the past. He represented the establishment, sort of this, I call it the uniparty swamp cartel. And I knew we were not going to bring transformational change that's needed to save the country with Kevin McCarthy as the leader. And that was demonstrated to be true, which I could document if you want me to. But that said, what I'm looking for is someone who is a leader. Kevin McCarthy failed to lead. That's why we ended up where we were. Someone who's a leader and possesses those essential basic qualities of leadership. Someone who's a fighter. And I say that in the sense that when you control one house of one branch of government, you're not going to get everything that you want, but you ought to be able to get some of what you want. And it shouldn't be a story of we surrender and cave and give in to the Democrats once again, which we did with the debt ceiling agreement and we did with the continuing resolution last Saturday. We surrendered to the Democrat position. And the House's leverage is the power of the purse, to where we got to be willing to say no and hold our ground and negotiate and use leverage points. So first of all, that kind of leadership toughness we need. is what I'm looking for. And then some commitments. What our commitments to bring our spending bills to the floor, which Kevin McCarthy promised to do and did not do. We've got 7 more of the 12 to bring. And our commitment to fight for border. What are we going to do to make, because we would have to make Joe Biden secure the border? What are we going to do to attack the weaponization of the government against its citizens based on political views? So some fight there where we're going to say no, we're going to have some resolve, and we're going to force at least some compromise where we get some of what we want, at least as we control the House majority.
Isn't part of being a speaker, though, working across the aisle, reaching the hand out and saying, hey, what can we agree on? What can we compromise on?
That certainly wasn't the case during the Pelosi regime. And I never had a reporter ever ask me, why doesn't Nancy Pelosi compromise more? Why doesn't Nancy Pelosi reach out and work with you Republicans? Because she had a majority. She could pass whatever she wanted out of the House. We should do the same with the Republican majority. I don't care what the Democrats want in the House. The American people entrusted us with the majority to fight against the Biden, Pelosi, Schumer policies that are in place from the last term. And so we need to defeat those policies and do what's the most conservative thing that we 221 Republicans come together and do. Now the Senate's a little bit of a different animal, but we don't control the Senate. But we pass the best stuff out of the House. Schumer does what he does out of the Senate. Hopefully the Republicans in the Senate will join with us and resist, because he's only got 51. He needs 60. So if Republicans stand strong in the Senate, even in the minority, they can hold him up and really apply leverage consistent with what we're doing. A lot of power we have if we will use it. Kevin McCarthy was not a partner in using it.
So no matter what Democrats put forward, you're going to be against it?
Well, it doesn't matter what they put forward, just like it didn't matter what we put forward in the last Congress. It doesn't matter. The Democrats only have 213 votes, so it doesn't matter. And frankly, the Democrats, in my view, are trying to destroy the country. There's no moderate Democrats anymore. They don't want to cut spending. They're literally trying to increase spending. They're literally trying to destroy American energy and force us onto unreliable, unaffordable wind and solar. They're literally facilitating the border invasion on purpose, and they don't want to secure the border. We have a very different vision for America,
sure.
a very different vision for the future of the country, and we need to defeat that, not work with that.
So who benefits from a government shutdown in your eyes?
Well, I, as you know, said weeks ago, hey, we shouldn't fear a government shutdown. And what I clarified and meant by that was not to the point where we will do anything to avoid the disruption or the discomfort of a temporary pause in government operations for the 15% that's considered non-essential.
And you think Kevin McCarthy did that?
Oh, absolutely. That's what I told the Friday before the consequential Saturday vote on the continuing resolution that passed with all the Democrats voting for it. I begged and pleaded with him not to do that. I said, Mr. Speaker, if the Dems know you'll do anything to avoid a shutdown, no matter what we do, they are going to say no. And if you're going to just cave because you're scared of a shutdown, we will lose every time. That's what it was. That's what he did, rather. So my point is, we shouldn't make things worse and exacerbate the problems and stick it to the country once more by keeping these harmful policies and these reckless spending that's bankrupting us just to avoid a government shutdown. If it takes using a shutdown to force the Democrats to negotiate, we should be willing to do that.
Okay. And you're blaming some Republicans and Democrats.
Well, the reason that we moved our speaker is because we had a failure in Republican leadership.
Should the motion to vacate be changed? Because right now, as you know, it only takes one person, and this one person the last time was Matt Gaetz. Are you okay with that, or would you like the threshold to go back to the 5 vote
For 200
threshold?
years, it was 1. From 1801, I believe, is when it got in place with Thomas Jefferson, until Nancy Pelosi changed it, really about 215 years. And well, all we did was, when we eventually voted in Speaker McCarthy, of course I didn't vote for him, but I changed my vote to president to allow those who were voting for him to pass it. We changed the rules of Congress, went back to what's called a regular order, how we're supposed to operate until Pelosi had changed them, including holding the Speaker accountable. But it should be one person, that's how it always was one, but only one person can initiate and say, hey, let's have a vote. One person couldn't vote out the Speaker.
Yeah,
so
but you know,
a confident, secure leader recognizes they serve at the pleasure of those whom they serve and lead, quite frankly. And that's how it was for 200 years. It's been filed twice. Or in the last couple hundred years, filed twice. Mark Meadows did it, and then John Boehner resigned. We never had a vote on it. And then we did it with Speaker McCarthy, as you know, this past week. So while it's not like I never made January about that. I thought it was appropriate and right for it to be there, and I don't think it should be changed. I often said back in January, if I felt like we needed to vacate the chair, I could find 5 friends to join me in doing that. And we didn't do it cavalierly. We didn't do it flippantly. We didn't do it without, frankly, recognizing the gravity and the seriousness of the situation. It took us 9 months of Kevin McCarthy's failures. You could argue we should have done it back on June 1 when he did the debt ceiling increase. You could argue that we should have done it when he failed to bring impeachment articles against Secretary Mayorkas like he promised to do, or when he failed to bring a vote on term limits like he's promised to do, or to bring the balanced budget vote to the floor like he promised to do, or when he failed to bring to the floor he only brought 1 of 12 spending bills before we went on the August work period when he promised we would do those well in advance of the September 30 deadline. So there's lots of reasons we could have done it, and the culmination was the continuing resolution.
You also know that the other 90% of your party in the House felt differently, and that he should have kept the speakership. And they're not happy with how this all played out. They're not happy with you. They're not happy with Matt Gaetz. They're basically saying that you guys have no interest in governing, and you just want chaos for the sake of chaos.
Well, I will wear the badge proudly that I want to hold Republicans accountable to do what we run on, to do what we told the American people we would do, to fight for them instead of fighting for the Washington, D.C. swamp, and recognizing that we are not going to get there with the status quo, quite frankly. And almost no Republican privately defended Kevin McCarthy. Almost every member of Congress that I've talked to over the last couple of years recognized him as a untrustworthy, dishonest broker, a weak, feckless leader, and recognized that he had put us in the situation we were in that led to some of us considering the motion to vacate. Now that said, again, courage is in short supply in Washington, taking risks is in short supply in Washington, and there's this fear of the unknown, fear that it won't succeed, fear of consequence and retaliation, that some members are willing to risk to do what they know to be right. And there was a very different feeling among a much larger group once it succeeded on Tuesday night, and there was a lot of regret from members who didn't join us. Now publicly, they have to kind of defend why they didn't do it, and to say, gosh, I was scared to do it, or I didn't know where it would go, I thought it would fail, is not really a good explanation or defense.
The word trustworthy is a word that I've heard described about Kevin McCarthy, not just from Republicans, but also Democrats as well. Hillary Clinton said something just the other day that there needs to be a deprogramming of the MAGA cult members. You've been a Trump supporter. Are you helping to lead a cult?
I think that's a silly question that doesn't deserve a response.
Okay, all right. But she thinks that there are some within the party who are part of what some call
Well, Hillary
a cult.
Clinton called half the country deplorables back when she was running.
She did.
Thankfully, we spared her from becoming president.
All right. The Biden administration has authorized the construction of a new section of the border wall in the Texas Rio Grande Valley, as I'm sure that you're aware of. I think it's 20 miles of that. That sector of the border alone has seen nearly 300,000 migrant encounters between October of 2022 and August of this year. That's according to data from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Is that enough? Is that a good beginning for the kind of protecting the southern border that you'd like to see?
You've heard me say this before, but it bears repeating. Never in the history of the country has our own president done more to intentionally harm the United States than what he's done with the border. He's not confused. He literally, the first day he got in office, stopped the building of the wall, stopped it, prohibited states and the federal government from trying to secure the border. He immediately rescinded the Remain in Mexico policy that was working, which basically said the hundreds of thousands a month of illegals who are coming with false, fraudulent asylum claims, meaning asylum is based on, do you have credible fear or threat of religious or other persecution? Not just because you want a better life and economic hardship, but actually you're being persecuted for some protected reason. Sure. 90% of which statistically it's not disputed, are fraudulent. Trump was brilliant. He said, you know what, when you come, if you're going to have to wait in Mexico, you're not going to get in the United States and be released like Biden is doing until your case is heard. We used to have a detain or return policy. I mean, you had to hold them at the border or return them to their home country. Biden switched that to catch and release with all the benefits and privileges of citizenship, essentially in terms of welfare, social services, health care, education services, even housing and travel. We're paying thousands of dollars a month to house illegals in the country. 7 million have come across the border since this president has been there in now nearly 3 years. 1.5 million of those are the criminal gotaways who don't surrender to Border Patrol for all the free stuff because they've got terrorist ties, criminal ties, or they're trafficking children, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, record amounts of fentanyl that are killing about 100,000 Americans on an annual basis. This is the policy of the Biden administration. If he secures the border tomorrow, irreparable harm will be done. Once that border is secure and the bad individuals inside the country, who only time will tell how many we've let in and what they will do, we will suffer that harm. So that said, obviously he should build the wall, but he's succumbing very modestly for visual purposes or for theatrical purposes. 20 miles of the wall when we've got, 1,000 miles of unprotected border. We had a few hundred miles of the Trump wall and about 1,000 miles exposed. He's not confused. I know he doesn't go to the border and see it. Kamala Harris, the border czar, doesn't go to see it. Democrats never go to the border. I've been there 5 times. When you talk with Border Patrol, they say, oh, we only ever see Republicans. Democrats don't come here because they don't care. But now you've got blue cities and states screaming about the impact there when they want it to be sanctuary cities and states. And New York even has this ridiculous right to shelter law where the hotels are filled with taxpayer dollar funding, housing illegals in the hotels. They're even housing them in the schools where their children there are going to school. You've got illegals that are unvetted, unidentified in the schools. This is a direct policy of the Biden administration, but now they're getting crushed in the polls and they know it's a loser, so he's trying to look like he's doing something. But as long as you don't have a will or a desire to enforce our laws and actually repel illegal invaders, illegal alien invaders, then 20 miles of wall is going to make very little difference.
I think Illinois' governor just hit the Biden administration with a few blows over what's happening with immigrants in that state. But what does a good immigration policy look like to you? What are the top 3 things that you're looking for besides making sure that these bad guys with drugs aren't coming in? What else is there?
Well, we need to
because there are a lot of
we
people.
Need to separate, and the Democrats lie and deceive. If Democrats were ever the truth about what they wanted, they could never win another election, whether it's based on energy or education, weakening our military, or whether it's the border invasion. Immigration and border security are not the same. Democrats conflate the two. As soon as you bring in a Democrat senator, and ask them about border security, and they'll say, oh, immigration. Immigration is a legal process, a lawful legal process. We're the most generous country in the history of the world with legal, lawful immigration. We allow 1 million annually, approximately, and we've been the most generous country in the history of the world, allowing immigrants. We're a nation of immigrants from all nationalities, all ethnicities. And you know, when they get here, they don't say, oh, this is a racist country. Don't come from their black and brown countries. They say, come on, it's awesome here. It's a wonderful place. It's imperfect because we're imperfect people. That's the truth about America. But illegals invading, they're not immigrating illegally, they're invading illegally. That is different. They are breaking our laws. They're not coming based on merit or qualifications or what they would contribute. And we have provisions for asylum for those who are truly suffering persecution for something that we consider a legitimate asylum claim. It's a very small fraction of the illegal invaders, quite frankly. So, first of all, secure the border, finish the wall. The wall is not a panacea that in and of itself is enough. Allow Border Patrol to do its job. We have National Guard and Border Patrol that are literally not allowed to repel or to return. Once they get there, they take them in, process them, and distribute them into the interior of the country at your expense for wherever you want to go without a court case or a notice to appear. We're going to get in touch with you in 3 or 4 years and give you a court date then if we can find you. So we need to reinstate remain in Mexico, which I just talked about that policy. We need to end catch and release and reinstate the detain or return. You're either detained at the border or you return to your home country. Once you do that, Mexico will do what it did during the Trump administration. If Mexico knows that everybody they let pass through gets held in Mexico until their asylum claim is heard and 90% of them are fraudulent, guess what? Mexico suddenly becomes concerned about their own southern border and housing the illegals, and Mexico begins to repel them at their southern border like Trump made them do.
So you don't think it's worth, as some people suggest, actually going to some of these countries where people are coming from and trying to help them fix what's wrong there? So they're not coming here.
3 or 4 fatal flaws with that. Number one, it is not the responsibility of the United States to go around the world and try to fix other countries. The arrogance of that, hey, we know best, we're going to fix your, it doesn't work, number one.
Does that include?
And secondly, we're bankrupt. We're running a $200 billion deficit. So to say we're going to send our resources and efforts to these other countries, and that's the Biden thing. Oh, we got to figure out root causes. Here's the root cause. You have an open border, and we're the best country in the world. And the Biden said, hey, we're going to give you amnesty if you come here. We're going to stop building the wall. We're going to let everybody in. That's what he ran on, or at least that's what he said in the October before the campaign. So for us to think we're going to go and fix all these countries. Now what we can do, and the Biden administration seems to be trying to do, let's dumb down, worsen, weaken America. Let's make it less attractive, and maybe then they'll stop coming here. That's what his policies are doing, but we don't have the ability or the justification or the resources to go fix the world so that they won't want to come here. And think about it, Mark. 7 billion people don't live here in the world. If they could, how many of that 7 billion, if they could, do you or I think might come here if they could? And for the Democrats, I've asked them this many times in my committee hearings on the House floor, when is enough too much? To flood the nation with not those who've earned citizenship. One of the great privileges I get to do as a congressman, I get to go to naturalization ceremonies and see those from all around the world who've come here legally, they've earned their citizenship, they've proven their patriotic contribution to the country. They don't look like me. Most of them aren't from European, Caucasian countries. They're from black and brown countries, and they're so grateful and they're so thankful, and it's very emotional. It's one of my favorite things I get to do. That's what we're about as a country, and they resent the illegal invasion that's happening at the border. They resent that because they want to preserve and protect America to be what America is. So at what point do we stop being America if we flood the country with people who don't embrace our culture, don't learn our language, don't assimilate patriotically, don't contribute to make us stronger, when we can't take care of all of our veterans and all the folks who need assistance in our country today, and we're bankrupt, we don't have the money, let alone the national security threat.
So with what's happening in Ukraine, is that something that you see we're trying to fix a problem that's not ours and we should just let the Ukrainians deal with that? We should stop funding them? Is that what you're saying?
Foreign policy like that, admittedly, is complex, and it's not simple and it's not easy.
It is complex,
It
but
is.
do you think we
It
should
is.
stop supplying
I do
them?
think always, again, I'm the 5th District Representative of Virginia. Our president is the president of the United States. Neither one of those had the word Ukraine or Mexico or whatever other country in there. And so United States interests first, I think, is our constitutional responsibility and our patriotic duty as the citizens' representatives. We have borrowed over $100 billion, borrowed, it's always critical we look through that lens, we have borrowed over $100 billion to send it to Ukraine. We're told we can't win a war with China right now, that we have depleted and weakened our military so much. Recruitment is down, resources are down. Our military can't pass an audit, hasn't in modern times. We got leaders of our military put there by Biden who don't even understand what the purpose of military is. They think it's to fight the climate war. Literally, that's what they have said. They're trying to electrify our vehicles with our military. What confidence do you have in this administration to effectively manage and run our military? I would say that's suspect. Secondly, to your point, while we can condemn the brutal, ruthless, bloodthirsty attack by Putin and want Russia to fail, as I do, and I think, well, first of all, some have said, well, would he have invaded when Trump was president? He didn't. He didn't. Trump was the first president since Jimmy Carter that didn't get us involved in a foreign conflict, quite frankly. And people feared America. They feared America power with President Trump.
Well, let's
with
remember
Biden,
that Russia attacked Ukraine.
Not during President Trump's presidency. That is not true.
No,
that is not true.
No, I'm not
Right.
saying that.
But he didn't do it when Trump was president. Biden did not stand up for Ukraine pre-invasion to supply Ukraine pre-invasion to try to head it off, and he enriched Russia by blessing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that Trump had blocked so that Russia could fund its war. If we would just increase our natural gas production and our petroleum production, we would bankrupt Russia's economy. He couldn't fund the war. Biden has done just the opposite, frankly, with his energy policies. And Biden's weakness is why Russia did not fear doing what they've done. But directly to your question, I haven't seen it demonstrate what is our direct national security interest, what is the limit of U.S. involvement, what is the exit strategy, what is the end game. These are going to be bordering countries for decades, if not centuries, to come. And so I don't see what the justification is for us to bear the load that NATO is not willing to bear and Europe is not willing to bear.
So let's not forget, though, the Russian aggression, right, kind of bled over into our elections. And so,
How so?
well, they were supporting President Trump.
That's totally dishonest, totally disproven. There was the phony Russian dossier. You had 50 national security experts lie and admittedly been proven to have lied, and they said that on the eve of the election to try to help Joe Biden. You spent all those years in the Trump administration attacking him for the Russian collusion, which was proven to be a hoax. There was no evidence to that effect, and they did that for 4 years to try to undermine President Trump. It's been disproven. It's been, if not disavowed by the liars. We should revoke the national security clearance of all 50 of those supposed national security intelligence people who signed on to the phony Russian dossier. There's been no proof to demonstrate that.
I think through social media, it's been pretty well documented. So,
well, I'm not going to suggest that Russia, or China for that matter, don't try to influence our elections. By the way, like the United States, has explicitly, under Democrat presidents, tried to influence elections in Israel, by the way, blatantly, officially, in their official acts. So I'm not going to say Russia or China doesn't try to distribute disinformation, but folks have suggested dishonestly that they were colluding with the Trump administration, and why Putin, who feared Donald Trump and didn't invade Ukraine, somehow wanted him to be president instead of Joe Biden, who did nothing to prevent it, and he obviously didn't fear.
Let's talk about Glenn Youngkin. A lot of Republicans, some Republicans, would like to see him run for president. If he did, would you support him, or are you a Trump guy?
Well, full disclosure, I've endorsed Ron DeSantis, did that months ago. And so I am a Trump guy, loved him as president, would enthusiastically support him again. I think he's the best president of my lifetime. It was a terribly effective president and tremendously
President Trump is leading in all the polls.
He is. And my primary reason is because I think we need 8 years. And unfortunately, elect a 4-year, you're somewhat lame duck almost initially. And the Trump presidency showed that as much work as he did, we needed 8 years of a Trump presidency instead of 4 years. So, but that said, I will support enthusiastically whoever emerges, and certainly President Trump is the favorite to do so. I forget the second part of your question. You asked.
No, would you support Glenn Youngkin running?
I think it'll probably be too late in the game. I'm thankful that he's our governor. I think Senator Youngkin sounds really great, and so I'd like for him to think about that for 26. But I think he's doing a good job. I support what he's doing, and I hope that we can give him the majority that he needs from the Senate to help the House and he enact the policies they're fighting for.
Just one final question for you on the economy. The jobs report just came out today, and it was pretty strong. I know that you feel the economy is on the wrong track. A lot of Republicans do. What will turn things around in your eyes? Well, short of a new president and taking control of the Senate.
It doesn't really matter what I think. The American people overwhelmingly recognize the economy is terrible under Joe Biden. We've got 3 million less people working than were working when he became president. Our labor participation rate's the lowest it's ever been on record, meaning able-bodied, working-age Americans who are not working, we're down to about 60%. That's crushing us economically in terms of productivity. We've got the largest number of people on welfare, and even able-bodied individuals. Democrats are resisting our efforts to require work for able-bodied Americans without dependents to work in exchange for federal assistance, which is critical culturally. It's critical economically to get our economy going again. It's also critical from a spending standpoint. Again, we are bankrupt, running a $200 billion deficit. We need to return to the pro-growth policies that wages were going up. Wages are going down with Biden. We've got record inflation, which is crushing people. We talked about that a minute ago, 40-year high inflation. We've got 20-year high interest rates, grocery prices, utility prices, gas prices, killing regular working class Americans based on the spending policy. So we've got to cut our spending. We've got to return to pro-growth. Regulation, just the regulations. Trump cut 7, 8 regulations for every new one that was in place. Biden has reversed that and layered us with burdens of regulation, which drives up costs. American people are suffering. The economy is weak because of this president.
All right. Congressman Good, so great to have you in the studio to talk about all of these things that are happening.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be with you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.